All right. Hello. Welcome back to a Purpose and Pixie Dust podcast interview. I'm Lindsay Dollinger, and I'm so excited for our guest. I have been wanting to have her on our show for a really long time. And I'm not going to introduce you. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about you, who you are, where you're from, what you do, all the stuff.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm Bec. I'm from Australia, which you might be able to hear in my accent.
Yeah.
I'm based on the East Coast. And I'm a spiritual business coach. So I support spiritual women to build, grow, and scale their businesses using soulful business strategy, mindset, energetics, feminine spirituality, all of the fun things.
Yeah. And how did you start doing that? Like, I'm sure you didn't just wake up one day and be like, I'm going to be a spiritual business coach. Like, what did your journey look like to get there? Because I always find people's journeys so intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, if you told me I was doing this when I was at high school, I'd be like, what are you talking about? That is not a thing.
Yeah, exactly right. I love it.
Yeah. So I started my business in my 20s. So it was just over 7 years ago now, which feels wild.
Yeah.
And I started actually very randomly making candles. So that was my first, wasn't technically my first foray into business. I kind of dabbled with, different things when I was at uni, but it was my, my first, like, this is going to be a business.
Yeah.
So I really started that too as a bit of a creative outlet and something fun that I could build and create and do outside
Yeah.
of my day job.
Mhm.
And then it kind of started building up and I really loved it. And I got to that point, that kind of tipping point of like, if I want to make this a thing, I'm going to have to kind of have more time. And so
Yeah.
I was very grateful. My workplace kind of let me kind of drop a few days. And so I
Great.
had that kind of really nice transition into full-time business.
Yeah.
And at the same time, so I was already a trained Reiki healer,
Oh,
which is, one of my qualifications, Reiki
yeah.
master. And I was already infusing, my candles were already kind of with a spiritual vibe, right? Like it was all about
Cool.
healing energy and they were really beautiful. I then made some goddess candles, which actually you can see the artworks. How do I move?
Oh, yeah.
See the artworks
Yeah.
behind me. So these were the artworks that I had done by my friend that were for the candles. And so I
Cool.
now am surrounded by the artworks in my office. But I made goddess candles. I then launched those with some goddess workshops and I ran them actually with my mum, who is a professional psychic medium. So I've been around the spiritual space for a long time.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Okay, keep
Yeah.
going. Okay.
So we ran these goddess workshops and I very quickly realized like, oh, I love this work, this kind of transformation work with women, supporting them to kind of step into a more empowered place, heal, all of this stuff. And so I then decided I wanted to kind of train and do a little bit more in that space. And so once we were kind of running those, I then had women coming to me being like, do you do one-on-one work? How can I work with you more? And so I kind of stepped into the space of spiritual life coaching, which I loved. And then because I've always been very grounded, practical, and the strategy side of things comes, and organization side of things comes very naturally to me. And so, and what happens is when women come through, that kind of transformation journey, that healing journey, they go, oh, I want to share this with others as well. Like I've realized that I really want to share this modality that I found really helpful, or I want to share, this thing. And so they kind of go on this own journey of like, actually, maybe I could start my own business. Hey, Bec, you've got a business. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And because I'd already really loved that, my mum's been, in business for a long time, and I'd often helped her with things like, the social media side of things, a lot of the online stuff. I found it quite a natural step to go, okay, yes, let's do this. And I found I really loved that. And so I am now fully in that space of being a spiritual business coach and kind of niched down into that,
Yeah.
which I really, really love. And the other part of my story that's relevant but kind of a bit random is that I was also a food and travel blogger prior to running my business.
Oh my
So
gosh. Love
I had
that.
some of this experience,
Yeah.
kind of, social media, creating websites, all of that sort of stuff was, very much in my wheelhouse as well, doing some photography. And so it kind of all blended together into this, beautiful journey that just landed me here. And I love it.
I love that because it's not that your story is just like someone else's, but it's that natural path that they take. Like, who would ever think that your candle company would lead you to what you're doing now? But when you explain it like that, like it all logically makes total sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah. I
okay,
think it's
so
very much, oh, sorry. I was just
no,
going to
no,
say,
no,
it's
cool.
very much like following that intuitive
Yeah.
nudge, and
Mhm.
also the other thing that I find is, people really want to get it right straight out the gate and like get all the pieces of the puzzle together and have everything correct and exactly how it's going to be forever. And it's just like, it just doesn't work like that. You've kind of just got to start and see where it takes you.
Yeah. And I thought that exact same thing too. And I think there was so much freedom when I realized like my business now is not necessarily going to be what my business looks like in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, because that can hold us back so much because then we're building something. We're like, but do I really want to be doing this in 30 years? And you're like, but you could be doing something completely different. Like you never know what that's going to look like. And there's so much freedom in being able to let that expectation go, I think, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So what are the type of or I don't know if type is the correct word, but what sort of clients do you work with now? Are they like just beginning their business? Have they already been doing a business? What are the majority of your clients currently doing?
Yeah. So the majority of my clients are already in established businesses. So they've been in
Okay.
business a little while. I do have a program which supports people in those early stages. And that's
Mhm.
something that I'm looking at turning evergreen. So it's kind of been
Mm,
something I've live launched over the last few years. And so we have an evergreen version. We just need to kind of tweak a few things and pull it
yeah.
together. So
Yeah.
that's something that I can offer people in that space. But in terms of my programs where I support people in an ongoing way, in a live way, then they're more established. And so I kind of work with people. I've got two different programs. So I work with people who are in that space of like building out to create some consistent cash in their business, so some
Mm,
consistent cash flow. Because I realized this year, that's a new program. I realized this year that, there are a lot of people who have been in business for a little while and they're kind of in that like fluctuating space where,
mm,
things go up, things go down. There's not that consistency. And it's like, let's
yeah.
create some like foundational consistency for you.
Yeah.
And then my other program is all about scaling. And so that takes you
Okay.
from that space of I've got offers, I've got clients, maybe I'm approaching fully booked, or, maybe I'm looking at how I then take this to the next level. And that's my program. My mastermind program
Mm.
takes
Oh, I
people
love that.
into that space.
Yeah. So I'm assuming based off what you were just describing that these are like small groups or like you said, mastermind level, like it's not necessarily all one-to-one, correct? Since we're talking about
Yeah.
scaling.
Yes. Yeah. So definitely. I did one-to-one work prior to having kids. And then
Mhm.
my son, my eldest, was born 4 years ago. And that was a point where I went, I'm going to start transitioning into group work
Yeah.
because obviously that makes the most of my time and I can still show up and support people. And so, yeah, I work in a group program mastermind model now.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I do very limited one-on-one, and I actually just told everyone in my community today that I'm pretty sure that one-on-one is going away in 2024. Just, like one of the things that we're going to talk about is scaling your business, but also knowing those seasons in life that you are in and like what is the best effective most, use of my time. So like you said, you're a busy mom. And I think you told me you only work your business around 10 hours a week, right? Is that
Yeah.
true? Okay,
Yeah. At the
so for
moment.
the for the people listening to that who are like, "Girl, how is she doing that?" Tell us all the things. Like, give us some pointers. How do you go about just working your business 10 hours a week? Because that's awesome.
Yeah. So I do that because I'm currently full time with my youngest. So he's
Yeah.
14 months now. And I
Oh,
will have more time next year. So,
yeah.
I'm planning he's going to have daycare. And so I'll have a little bit more time, which will be really
Mhm.
nice because it is still a challenge. Like I can do it, but 10
Right.
hours a week is still a bit of a stretch, in
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of, you've got to kind of always be on it, essentially. You've kind of
Mhm.
got to always be organized. And what I do is I kind of plan separately to executing, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
what I want to do when I have time to sit down at my desk, which doesn't happen all that often, but I want to be able to just hit the ground running, and I want to be able to go, okay, these are the things that are my priorities right now. These are the things I need to get to my team. These are the things that I need to do for my clients. These are the things I need to do for the business, and just go. And the only way I can do that is if I already have a plan of what that looks like. And so I plan ahead, and we get really detailed. I'm constantly chatting to, I've got 2 people in my team as well. And that's another
just going to
element
ask.
of it.
Yep. Just going to ask. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't do this on my own. And so I have a VA who works 10 hours a month for me. And then I have a content manager who works 10 hours a month as well. And so across that, we're able to produce what we need to produce and do the things we need to do.
Yeah. And I think that is such an important thing to admit to women, because there are so many people who don't share that they're getting help. And I'm like, girlfriend, there's no way you are only working 10 hours, 5 hours, whatever, and pumping out this amount of, work. Like, there has to be something behind the scenes. And then other people see it and we're like, well, if she's doing it, I have to be able to do that, And it's like, no, get some help, outsource, delegate if you can, or just know that, like, you're not going to be able to show up at the same level. So, like, you get to pick.
It's a trade-off, right? And you're in the driver's seat of that, and you get to decide what that looks like. I mean, I know even when I did have more time, when I started my podcast, for example, I was like, there's no way I can produce a podcast without getting someone else to do the editing and the production of that. Like, it's just the only way this happens is if I get help here, and if I outsource this element of it. And so that's what we did. And, and then it's the trade-off of like, well, do you really want a podcast? Because it's going to cost you money if you want a podcast, at this stage in time. And so you're always looking at, like, what's the trade-off here? And for me, a lot of that has been looking at, well, I just have less time right now. And so I spend more money on running my business than perhaps I would at another time.
Yep. Which did you bring on first, the content manager or the VA, or did you start in both at the same time? Do you remember?
So I started the VA at first, except that my content manager was my VA at the time. So she's kind of progressed through the business with me, which has been really, really nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And then we brought on a VA once we kind of worked out, her kind of wheelhouse was very much in, writing content and supporting me in that space. And so when we kind of looked at, like, expanding the team, it was like, oh, okay, actually, like, this is what I really want your support with.
Yeah.
And then what we can do is bring on someone who can do, some of those other tasks of, all of the admin and back end, organization and running of the programs and things.
I love that, because I know myself, having been through some people who said they were VAs, but or said they were social media, but they weren't able to do certain things. I'm like, just finding those spaces where people are actually able to work in their zone of genius and produce the quality work you want. And then realizing, okay, this actually isn't your wheelhouse. So let's, move some different tasks onto you, or find someone else who can do those things. I think that's super important when hiring.
Yeah. And, her business. Yeah, exactly. And her business had evolved, like, she'd stopped doing that for other people. And I was one of her only clients in that space. And it was kind of like, okay. We had a little bit of a break of working together as well, because she was like, I'm going to move out of this space for a bit. And then when she came back on the team, so it kind of all worked really beautifully.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And now, for people wondering, because I always get this question, where did you find your content manager and VA? Did you put a post out? Did you randomly find them? Was it someone you knew? What did that look like?
Oh, that's a good question. So my content manager, we actually met in a mastermind that I was in. And so at the time, I was bringing on my first ever team member, and I put out like a message to my community, and she applied for it. And I was like, hey,
cool.
So that was really nice, because we already knew each other, and we are, like, very good friends now as well, which is really nice. And she's also building her business at the same time. So it's really nice to have that, peer relationship as well as that, client relationship. And then my VA is through an agency, actually, and the agency is owned by a friend. And so I kind of went to her and said, hey, this is what I need. And she's the same VA for my mum. And so I actually went, can I have her?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so,
Oh, that's so good. I love that. I
yeah.
love that you and your mom are both in business together. Like it's so cute. I'm like, that's
We
so
love
fun
it.
to have a family. Yeah, because my sister does business too. So it's so nice to have someone close to you who like knows you really well, who's going through, all the things and the emotions of being an entrepreneur and really is able to understand that because a lot of people don't get it.
Yes. Yeah. It's so nice.
Okay, so let's go a little bit back to the more woo things because I'm loving the woo stuff, all the woo everything.
Okay.
One of the things that you are really good at is helping your clients scale in an aligned and energetic way that matches their energy. What are some ways, maybe, and this might not even be the right question, but what are some ways that you're able to help clients do that, or maybe some questions or things that you can work through to help make sure that your business is actually truly aligned with what you want?
I love this question.
It
So
might be really deep, like probably
yeah.
multi-layer. I'm sure.
Well,
Like,
yeah, well, and it's personalized, right? So it's going to be
mm-hmm.
always different for different people, which is the point, I think. The first thing is to realize that it's always going to be unique to you. So what works for someone else may not work for you. And actually finding that sweet spot, maybe takes a little bit of, finessing, and you've kind of got to
Yeah.
test and tweak things. As we were kind of talking about before, you may not necessarily, what works for you now might not work for you in
Yeah.
a year's time or 2 years' time. And being okay with that and being willing to evolve the business alongside you, I think is really important. And also kind of test and play with that. Like, what happens if I do this thing, or what happens if I do that?
Yeah.
So that's an element of it. Another big element is trusting your intuition. And, even when I work with clients, sometimes I'll suggest something to them and they'll kind of like look at me in this way. And I'm like, okay, so are we dealing with like fear around that? Or are we dealing
Yep.
with like, that's really not aligned right now?
Mm.
And I think the biggest thing is being able to kind of work out the difference between
I
that.
was
So when
just
you
gonna
have,
say, yeah.
yeah, you have like this reaction to something that's, you have this reaction to something that's like, okay, that doesn't sit well in my body, but is it because I don't want to, I don't like the idea of showing up on video and that freaks me out a little bit? Or is it because
Yeah.
actually the thing that we're doing isn't aligned, and being able to
Right.
work out that?
Yeah.
So the way that I always support clients to kind of think about that kind of fear, self-doubt voice and that kind of intuition voice is working out, like, is it that you're excited about the thing and then you have those thoughts of like self-doubt come in to try and convince you out of it?
Mm.
And if you're trying to convince yourself kind of like out of something that feels really good, then that's generally that self-doubt that's trying to do that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we've got to trust that first feeling. And then on the flip side of that, if you're like, oh, I should be doing this thing in my business, and then you're trying to convince yourself into doing that thing because it's what everyone else does, or it's just maybe an idea you've had and you're trying to convince yourself into it, then that's usually the self-doubt, the fear voice trying to convince you into it. And actually maybe we need to take a break and be like, okay, where are we at here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I normally do with clients is, we'll kind of talk through like, where are you at now? What does the business look like? What's your business model? And so we kind of do all of the practical things. And then it's like, okay, well, what's the next step here? These are some options. And usually I'm really big on giving people options.
I
And
like that.
then
Yeah.
they come in and go, oh, okay, this is what I'm thinking. And then they'll say something to me, or they'll be like, okay, this is how I'm thinking it'll work. And I'm like, okay, well, and we just kind of dig deep, like, why do you want to do it in this way? And so we want to kind of just be really clear on the why. And I'm
Yeah.
always telling my clients this, like, why, and what's the why, and what does it mean, and what does it mean to you? What does this mean for your clients? And when you can be really clear on the why behind something, then you're going to be much more grounded in that being the right decision, because you're going to be sold on that. You're going to be,
Yeah.
clear on, I'm creating a mastermind model for my business because, it supports me to have more time. I know that it gives my clients the most, contact with me, but the best results, because we're in that smaller
Yeah.
container. We've got that opportunity to kind of dive deep, do the things, do it over a long period of time. Like all of those things, if you know the why behind why you're setting something up and what it means for you personally, what it means for the business, what it means for your clients, and how it's the right, in air quotes, choice for you and the business right now, then you can kind of show up for that and you can go, okay, this is it, knowing that it might change in a little while, but for now, this is what it looks like.
I think that's so powerful. And especially for anyone listening who is direct to client, the coaches out there, whatever, learning how to ask those questions and even as simple as the question, why? I don't even remember where I saw it. Maybe it was a post or like a course someone was trying to sell, but they were saying that about questioning, about how important it is for coaches to be able to ask the right questions and really dig deep. And I think you're 100% right. And I love that you give options to people too, because it can be so easy for us as coaches to be like, okay, this is the thing that you need to do. And you can tell that they're like really afraid of it, or there's all those things holding them back. So I love that you encourage, and you do give your clients options of things. So like maybe if they're not quite there yet, there are some like other baby things that they could do in order to get there. I think that's really powerful.
And it's important to consider the things, like to consider all of the different elements of like, okay, if we do this, if you go down a membership model, for example, we just need to get a lot of people into that. If you're working a lower cost model and you want to make, consistent cash from that and good money, it requires volume. And that requires a different strategy. And you've got to be willing to go all in on that strategy. And so it's like if this is the thing that you're feeling really called to, this is what's required of it. And being really clear on that, and being like, if you don't want to do that, and that's okay, then, maybe we go down this road where, we can have this strategy, which might feel a little bit less intense for you right now.
Yeah. And making sure that you have that commitment to those strategies or whatever you decide, I think is a big part of that alignment as well, because there's a lot of times when we're like, okay, I'll try that, I'll do it. And we're not really actually committed. Like it's not a full body yes. So I think that, that commitment will definitely help get those results across as well. Okay. One more question. And I love that you are really big on the strategies and the systems and the things that some coaches would refer to as like the more masculine side of business, but you're meshing it with the feminine side. And I'm sure you see people that come to you that are really strong, like one way or the other. How do you help your clients kind of, and I don't even know if balance is the right word, but like even those out, like, those people who are coming in, like I'm very systems based too. Like I like my spreadsheets. I like, all that part of the business. And so adding in like that mindset piece and like the feminine selling side and all that I have to work at it. Like it's like a constant that, you know what I mean? It doesn't come as naturally to me as the more masculine side, so to speak. So how do you kind of help your clients like get the best of both worlds, or maybe even impress upon them like how important both of them are? Because I think as our society, like especially the feminine side is usually like seen as not as important or not as valued. And we know, that's not true.
Yeah, I love this question. So I definitely find people do sit on one side or the other more naturally. And so I have a lot of clients that sit on both sides. I have a lot of clients that actually sit on that feminine side as well, because they're highly intuitive and they love being in that flowy space. And I think it's essentially a case of going, okay, well, where are you sitting right now? And what are the practical like strategies or practices we can bring in that are going to really help you? And so if somebody's sitting in that more masculine space of like needing to get things done and, being more on the, strategy systems heavy side, that's great for many, many things. But we often need to slow things down maybe a little bit, or just hit the pause button and build in time for reflection and being and, just going, okay, let's take a second, check in with how this feels, because people in that space naturally are much more likely to create the thing and then realize afterwards that the thing doesn't necessarily feel that great.
Yes. Been there, done that. Yep.
Yeah. And so what we want to do is build in time. And actually, if you can play to the strengths of, generally people in that space are very organized, planned, follow a plan, do things from A to B. If you can kind of build in, okay, well, part of the plan, part of the strategy is that you take a moment and you go, okay, how is this feeling? What does this mean? And that's where I would probably ask people questions around like what it means for you. Why is this important? What is the why behind this? And so that allows people to really anchor into that space and to stay really grounded in like, okay, what is the vision? Is this thing that I'm building, aligning to the vision that I want for my life and for my business? And what does that look like? And so it's about creating that time and space. And then for people who sit more in the feminine side, which I've had many clients in this space, the big thing is, they will then shy away from things like systems because it's like, oh, that's like that's very restrictive.
Overwhelming.
Yeah. I don't want to be like placed in a box. I don't want to like not be able to, I want to be able to flow, And so the way that I explain it to people in that space is actually when we have a plan, when we're organized, we have like a container that we can flow within, And so again, it's about what the vision is and whether or not we're reaching that vision, because people in that space tend to not get things done that easily, or it feels really hard. And so they'll come to me being like, I've got all these plans, but I never can seem to finish things, or I can never seem to get there. And it's like, what we need to do is create some kind of container here for you. We don't want to like lose any of that flow or, that intuitive connection. But what we want to do is, create a plan for you to follow and actually finish the thing that you want to finish and get it done and get it out there, because that's stopping you from showing up and sharing your magic, right? And we want people to be doing that. So so that's what I support them to do. And so it very much depends on where you sit in that space. And how you view it and what that looks like, and then tailoring, what the solution is to, who the person is.
That makes sense. Yeah, that awareness piece. Awareness, I feel like, is my word of the year for like the last 3 years of my business, because it's just like, that reflection back on myself, and also like what my community wants and is doing, and my clients and all that. And like just constantly being aware of like, I don't even know if I want to say holes, but where are those little pockets where I get to improve, or I get to spend a little bit more time in my business? And a lot of it for me is on that feminine side. But I love how you say, you almost made like the feminine a little bit more masculine for me by being like, plan it into your day, make it part of that like flow. And I'm like, yes, I love that. That makes total sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like if your strengths sit in that space, then let's use that to your advantage, and what can that look like, and how can we design it in a way that makes sense for you, or how can we talk about it in a way that makes sense for you? That's really important.
I totally agree. I love this. Okay. I love this so much. And I am going to give you a chance in just a second to tell us all the ways we can connect with you, because I know my audience is going to want to do that. But I have a couple rapid fire questions I like to ask at the end. So the first one is, do you have a morning routine, a nightly routine, neither, both? What's that look like for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't really have either at this stage with young kids.
I get it.
But I do really like to just kind of weave things into my day. And so it's more about going, okay, now I've got a moment and I'm going to take that moment to just pause and breathe. Or, even I really am a fan of habit stacking. And so as I'm showering or getting ready in the morning, I'll often listen to, an audio that I've recorded myself of, what I'm manifesting at the moment, or, making my smoothie and infusing my smoothie with good vibes, and what I want to kind of, my intention for the day, thinking through that kind of thing. So I kind of weave it in whatever way I can.
I love that so much. I don't think we've ever had anyone say that, but that's so, I mean, I feel like so many people do that too, but they're not aware of that. Again, there's that word awareness, but I love that. Okay. Favorite personal development book, or maybe the last one that you read?
Oh, that's a good question. I think my favorite is The Alchemist, and it has been for a long time. I read that when I was a teenager. So
really? Oh my gosh. And it's still your favorite. That's so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then absolute last question is, where is your bucket list destination or your favorite place on this earth that you've ever been?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I
What is
also,
my
fun fact, used to be a travel blogger back in the day. So I love to ask the
Yes.
travel question. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I am trying to think where my bucket list destination. We would love as a family to go to Bali very soon, but I feel like
Ooh.
and I do love Bali. I've been there a number of times, but I don't know whether that's my bucket list destination. This is a good
Mm.
question that I've probably not asked
You're like,
myself in a really long time because,
yeah.
kids and things. I
Mhm.
think I would really love to go back to Europe and spend a bit of
Mm.
time in Paris.
Ooh. Have you been to Paris before?
I have been to Paris, but
Okay.
I'd really
Okay.
like to spend like a month there, I think.
Okay. Okay.
Like just
Yeah.
live the
As locals.
Parisian life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that
for
would
a
be
bit.
fun. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, you'll have to let me know when you do it so I can stalk you on social media. Live
Sounds good.
vicariously through you in Europe. Awesome, Bec. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. So tell us everywhere we can find and connect with you and work with you. And I will make sure to put all this in the show notes too for everyone.
Amazing. Okay, so where can you connect with me? My website is beccuzzillo.com and my Instagram is at bec.cuzzillo. So you can find me there. That's the best place to connect with me. And I would love to hear from you. So if you've enjoyed this today, let's connect. Please say hi. I'm also over on Facebook if that's more your jam. So at bec.cuzzillo again there. And I also have a podcast, Feminine Fire with Bec Cuzzillo, which Lindsay, you're going to be a guest on as well. So
Yay, I can't wait.
yeah, come over and listen to the podcast. I'd love to connect with you.
Love this so much. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.